How to avoid getting exploited, cheated, scammed, conned, and screwed in life. In this episode, we'll be looking at the psychology of con artistry and scams. This is going to be a practical episode with many useful tips that will save you thousands of dollars and maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout your life. So this is worth listening to. I have actually quite a bit of personal experience with this. This is a bit of a personal episode for me, which I'll get into here in a moment. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a story. Actually, there's going to be a lot of interesting stories throughout this episode, so stay tuned for those. Some of them will be amusing and entertaining. The first story I have for you is I was at a Enlightenment Intensive. This was maybe 5 years ago or so. I was in Canada, in the Toronto area, doing a week-long sort of meditation and contemplation retreat. And there we were sharing stories. And it was interesting because there was a man there about in his 40s who was sharing stories about his family life, and he was sharing certain traumas that he went through growing up in Canada there. He came from a family of hunters and trappers. They would trap all sorts of animals, his father and his brothers, and so he was part of this. And he was telling me about this one particular incident where he was telling me the craftiness of the fox. And I still remember to this day, it was a very poignant example. So he was talking about how tricky these foxes are. And what a fox will do, a fox will walk up to a house, near the forest. And let's say there's a house cat that lives on this property. And the fox will start to jump up and down and get all playful, trying to play with this cat. And the cat, usually the cat would be afraid of the fox. But here the fox is jumping up and down and acting all playful because it wants to play with the cat. At least that's what the cat perceives. And so the fox is jumping up and down and it's rolling around, kind of frolicking, and the cat lets down its guard, and the cat gets closer and closer to the fox. The fox is jumping up and down, the fox is getting closer and closer to the cat, and the cat also gets into a playful mood. And then finally, when the fox is close enough to the cat, the fox just jumps up, jumps on the cat, grabs him by the skull, and just crushes and cracks his skull open. And that's how the fox hunts. See, what you'll notice if you observe animals in the animal kingdom is that animals in nature use trickery to survive all the time. Whether it's the fox or some sort of camouflage snake, or many, many other creatures that do this. And actually, human beings in this sense are not that much different. Human beings have turned deception into an art form and into a survival strategy. And what you should know is that life is full of people who will cheat, scam, and con you if you're not careful, and if you're as naive and gullible as this house cat. So what you have to recognize is that there are foxes out there, and you got to be craftier than the fox to avoid getting your skull cracked open. So people weaponize cunning and intelligence. Now, even though that's the case, you have to be careful not to take the things that I'm saying here and become overly paranoid and overly cautious. But you do have to stay vigilant against this sort of stuff. And so this episode will sort of prepare you, because I feel like a lot of people are very naive about these things, and they're very susceptible to being cheated, scammed, conned, and exploited by others who are crafty and have turned this into a lifestyle for themselves, a career, so to speak. So this episode will help you to become more wise to the kind of tricks that can be played on you. And so here I want to share with you another amusing story. And this is a story of a man named Victor Lustig, who was a very successful and popular con artist. And he is known as the man who sold the Eiffel Tower. So here I'm going to read you a bit of a passage from Wikipedia about Victor Lustig and his con with the Eiffel Tower. So, quote, "In 1925, Lustig traveled back to France. While staying in Paris, he chanced upon a news article discussing the problems faced with maintaining the Eiffel Tower, which gave him inspiration for a new con. At the time, the monument had begun to fall into disrepair, and the city was finding it increasingly expensive to maintain and to repaint it. Part of the article made a passing comment that overall public opinion on the monument would move towards calls for its removal, which was the key to convincing Lustig that using it as part of his next con would be lucrative. So after researching what he needed to help him utilize the information from the article, Lustig set to work preparing the scam, which included hiring a forger to produce fake government stationery for him. Once he was ready, Lustig invited a small group of scrap metal dealers to a confidential meeting at an expensive hotel, whereupon he identified himself to them as the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. In the meeting, he convinced the men that the upkeep of the Eiffel Tower was becoming too much for Paris and that the French government wished to sell it for scrap. But that because such a deal would be controversial and likely spark public outcry, nothing could be disclosed until all the details were thought through. Lustig revealed that he was in charge of selecting the dealer who would receive ownership of the structure, claiming that the group had been selected carefully because of their reputations as honest businessmen. His speech included genuine insight about the monument's place in the city and how it did not fit in with the city's other great monuments like the Gothic cathedrals and the Arch de Triomphe. During his time with the dealers, Lustig kept watch on who would be the most likely to fall for his scam and found his mark in André Poisson, an insecure man who wished to rise up among the inner circles of the Parisian business community. As Poisson showed the keenest interest in purchasing the monument, Lustig decided to focus on him once the dealers sent their bids to him. Arranging a private meeting with Poisson, Lustig convinced him that he was a corrupt official, claiming that his government position did not give him a generous salary for the lifestyle he wished to enjoy. Believing the sale of the Eiffel Tower would secure him a place amongst the top businessmen, Poisson agreed to pay a large bribe to secure ownership of the Eiffel Tower. However, once Lustig received his bribe and the funds for the monument's sale, he soon fled to Austria. Lustig suspected that when Poisson found out that he had been conned, he would be too ashamed and embarrassed to inform the French police of what he had been caught up in, yet despite his belief, he maintained a check on the newspapers while in Austria. His suspicions soon proved to be correct when he could find no reference to his con within their pages, and thus he decided to return to Paris later that year to pull off the same scheme once more. However, when Lustig attempted to con another group of dealers and had managed to find a mark among them willing to buy the Eiffel Tower, the police were informed about the scam, and he fled to the US to evade arrest. End quote. That's from Wikipedia. And he went on in the United States to make further cons, which you can read about on his Wikipedia page. Quite fascinating. So these are the kinds of tactics and maneuvers that con artists engage in. And there's a lot of variations on this, which we'll be discussing, and I'll share some tips with you for how to avoid this kind of stuff. There's actually a great movie that I'm reminded of from the 1980s, a 1988 movie called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Steve Martin and Michael Caine, which is sort of a comedy movie about two con artists who are trying to outdo one another in trying to con some poor young lady of her life savings. So that's a great movie to watch on this topic. But now to bring it to more of a sort of a personal point, the reason this issue is personal for me is because actually I grew up in a family where we had a lot of con artistry, and my dad was a bit of a con artist, and he conned people and companies and governments out of hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, and this is how we survived. And I have a lot of crazy stories of the kinds of cons and exploits and scams that he would do. I won't be sharing all of them. There's quite a lot there to share. I could talk about that for hours. But the only reason I bring it up is because it gave me a very early exposure in my life as a kid. I grew up in this kind of household where this is how survival happened. And it gave me early exposure to how cons and scams work. And it made me very, very savvy to this kind of stuff. And so I feel like I have some unique insights, and I feel like a lot of people are just so naive because they didn't grow up in that kind of household, so they don't understand the mind of a con artist, where I saw that firsthand. For me, it was almost like learning a language. You know, you learn a language when you're really young, you just absorb it and you pick it up and you see how it really works, and then you can speak it fluently without even having to study it. And I feel like a lot of people have missed out on that, and that's why they're easy marks. And so I want to share with you some of the sort of like tips and insights that I learned from observing this very intimately. And there were there were pros and cons to this kind of childhood. The pros is that it made me very vigilant and aware, and it made me nearly immune to being conned. It's very easy for me to see through cons and through con artists, which was why, for example, it's just so painfully obvious to me with Trump, for example, that he's a con artist. The way he behaves is exactly like a con artist, but it's funny to me that a lot of people don't see that and they just fall for his cons. So that was the positive. The negative, though, of growing up that way is that it made me somewhat distant. It made me cynical. It made me overly suspicious, and it created some trauma within me. And it took me years to overcome some of that trauma. And maybe there's still some of that left that I'm still working through. It also instilled in me some bad habits, because in my family, lying, cheating, stealing, and low integrity behavior was very, very commonplace, and you were just expected to play along with that. And it took me many years to overcome that and to shed some of those bad habits. And in the end, this sort of lifestyle ended up destroying my family. So it has terrible consequences. So I definitely don't recommend living this kind of lifestyle. It's very dysfunctional, and it leads to bad stuff. But like I said, most people are naive to this kind of stuff, especially in first world countries. I find that people are actually more savvy in third world countries where this sort of con artistry is more common. But in first world countries, in like nice neighborhoods in America, I feel like people grow up in these sort of like comfortable, cloistered suburbs, and they don't know what it's really like to get conned or scammed, because that kind of stuff just doesn't exist there, or you grow up so sheltered from it that then you become very susceptible to being conned. And I feel that a lot of people who are raised in honest households where this kind of behavior is unacceptable or considered immoral, they can't even imagine the mind of a con artist. And I can help you to understand that. Cons and scams are inversely proportional to one's level of development and consciousness. The less developed you are, the less conscious you are, the more open you are to using cons and scams to get by in life and to turn that into your career with no moral qualms about it, because this is just how you survive. In the same way that, when the fox is being crafty in the way that it hunts, the fox is not feeling guilty about it. This is just the way the fox survives. This is how it hunts. And so it is for a lot of con artists and scammers out there. Which is why in third world countries, actually, countries like China, India, Russia, Nigeria, and elsewhere like that, scams and cons are extremely common. And in those kind of countries, if you want to grow up in those kind of countries, like, you're going to be exposed to that kind of stuff very early on, and you're going to become very savvy to it. And this is why a lot of times when first worlders travel around to third world countries, they get scammed and conned so easily. These are very common kinds of stories. Some rich Americans go to China or to Russia or to India, and then they get caught up in a con. Because that kind of stuff is not as prevalent in America, although, of course, it exists here. But it's way, way worse in a country like China, India, or Russia. So what you must understand is that cons and scams are how low consciousness people survive. It's a survival strategy, so don't try to take it too personally. Desperate people who are desperate to feed their family, they will lie, cheat, and scam their way into doing that. And if you're into cons and scams yourself, or your family is, it's crucial that you commit to reforming yourself or to extricating yourself out of that toxic family situation. Because living the life of a con artist, or even adjacent to a con artist, having a con artist or scammer in your life, whether it's a family member or a friend, something like that, will ultimately end up destroying your life. These people cannot help themselves. They don't like to change. They keep coming up with new cons and scams. And so you need to be able to distance yourself. And if you are part of that, you have to stop doing that. Otherwise, it will destroy your life. And so really, this just goes to the sort of classic Buddhist principle. One of the Buddhist principles is right livelihood. It's important if you want to live a good life and you want to develop yourself and grow your consciousness and all this and become successful and happy in a genuine way, that you understand the importance of this principle of right livelihood. There are right ways to make a living in the world, and there are wrong ways to make a living in the world. And this is not a moral judgment. This is simply a consequence of karma. If you live in the wrong ways, karma will come back around eventually. It'll boomerang on you and it'll get you, and you will lose all your wealth, all your success, your reputation. You will lose your friends, your family, and maybe even your life if you get caught up in this kind of stuff. On the other hand, if you practice right livelihood and you work hard and you're honest in the way that you work, you don't scam people, you don't cheat people, then this is the true path towards success and towards happiness. I've actually had, even though I am pretty savvy to being conned and scammed, I'd still had experiences in my life growing up where, early experiences where I got duped in various ways. I'll share some of those with you. So for example, one of the earliest experiences I can remember, maybe I was like 10 years old, and I was into video games at that time, and I had all these video game magazines, and every one of these video game magazines, they seemed to have like this 2-page full ad inside the magazine at the time. This was back in the mid-90s or so, where there was like a sweepstakes. You can send them $5 and enter this sort of sweepstakes, and then what they would do is they would have like a grand prize, and on this 2-page ad, they would show you the grand prize. And the grand prize was like this ultimate entertainment system that you could get. It included like a big screen TV and a satellite dish and like a stereo system with surround sound speakers, like the works, and like a bunch of different video game consoles, just like everything. You got like the full, I don't know, that was probably like a $10,000 or $20,000 like full home entertainment system. Like at that time, to me, like as a young kid, I'm like, oh my God, I love this thing. Like I just want that entertainment system, right? So I'm like, of course I'm going to enter this sweepstakes. And the way that it worked is that you send them $5, and then what they would do is every month they would send you like a little puzzle in the mail. This was back in before the internet. In the mail, they would send you this puzzle. You have to solve this puzzle on like a paper. It's like a sort of like a word puzzle. You solve it, and then you send it back to them. And every month, basically, the puzzles got harder, and you have to keep solving them and solving them and solving them. And then also you kept paying them more and more every month. And then as as that progresses, eventually, I think the way it was supposed to work is that people were supposed to like fail the puzzles, and then they drop out. And then the last man standing in this whole puzzle scheme or game ends up winning the grand prize. That's how it was set up. But it was very sneaky the way it was set up, because they didn't tell you up front that you would be investing more and more every month. They made it seem like, oh, it's only $5. But then with every puzzle, they would sucker you in, because they would like raise the stakes of what you would win. They would say, oh, okay, so you paid $5 last month, but if you want to win an even better entertainment system with like, we'll include a second satellite dish, or we'll include a second game console or something like that, then you pay another $5. And of course you want that. So there's that sunk cost fallacy. So you pay another $5. And then the next month they up the stakes even more, and then you pay another $5, and you keep doing that and doing that. I didn't lose a lot of money in this thing, but this was formative for me because actually at the time, I showed this to my dad before I entered into this sweepstakes, and he told me that this is just a waste of time and a waste of money. I didn't believe him. So I did it anyways. But then as I got suckered into it more and more and more, eventually I realized that, wait a minute, what am I doing here? What are the chances that I'm actually going to win this thing? The chances were, of course, zero, and probably nobody won that entertainment system. It was just a way of getting money out of people. And so eventually I realized that. And that was important for me because I saw how I got sucked into it. I saw how my own desire for this entertainment system was used against me. I saw how they kind of baited me in with that sunk cost fallacy, getting me to pay a little bit more every month and getting me all excited about it. And so I didn't end up losing a lot of money, probably not more than $100, which is really nothing. But that taught me such a valuable lesson at such a young age. And then for the rest of my life, I would avoid these sorts of sweepstakes and similar schemes. Another funny story I'll share with you is that when I was a little bit older, maybe like 14 years old, this was the early internet days, like the late 90s. And somehow I got sucked into a scheme for buying property on Mars. This was hilarious. So some company set up a website during the very early internet era where they started selling property on the planet Mars. And the way they framed it on their website is that, like, we have the official rights to sell property on Mars. Of course, they didn't. Basically, anybody can set up a website. You can still set up a website today claiming to sell property on Mars. But anyways, they would have like an actual map of Mars, and they would actually show you a little square of where your property would be, and then you send them like $100 or something, and then they actually send you a certificate. Sort of, it looks official, right? It's got a foil seal on it, and it's got someone's signature on it. It looks like a diploma almost, like this sort of like official certificate or deed of your Martian property. And of course, the pitch was, the way they pitched it to you is like, mankind has already been to the moon. The next place mankind is going to Mars, and wouldn't it be nice to already have a piece of that action, a piece of that property? Like, what's Mars real estate going to be worth 100 years from now? It's going to be worth millions. So get in early, get on the ground floor. And I was so naive. And I think my brother was into it too, I think, at the time. I can't remember. Maybe a brother or a friend, I don't remember who, but somebody else was doing this with me. And so we just kind of like, we had this fantasy in our minds that, we're going to own a piece of Martian property. How cool will that be? So we ended up doing that. And of course, later I realized of my own recognizance just how absurd and ridiculous that whole scheme was. Of course, nobody is authorized to sell property on Mars. I'm sure there were many different kinds of websites that were, self-appointedly just selling this kind of stuff. Anyone can make some certificate claiming that it's official. But of course, in reality, the way that property on Mars is going to work is that whoever gets there first and gets to defend that property, that's who's going to really own it. And in fact, I think there's like international treaties that say that no country can lay claim to lunar property or Martian property. It's going to be based on a sort of like first come, first served basis. So anyways, yeah, that's that. I got scammed a little bit there too. Another scam that I experienced was that I would go to Subway when I was young, probably around the same age, maybe 15 years old. I would go to this Subway, and there was like a little box there where you can drop your business card or something, where they offered a chance to win a free gym membership. So anyways, I put some kind of business card in there with my name on it, and then I get a call back like a month later telling me that I won a free gym membership to like 24-hour fitness. It was like a $300 value of gym membership. I'm like, okay, cool, that's awesome. I wanted to go to the gym at that point. Hadn't really been and couldn't really afford it. So I got all excited about that. But then when I actually came, they're like, okay, so you have to like now come in to the gym and we'll set you up with the membership and all that stuff. We'll get it all set up for you. So I come in there trying to get all this stuff set up. And then as that's happening, they start to upsell me. They don't just give you a free membership, no strings attached. They start to upsell you. And then eventually what ends up happening is that by the time they're done upselling you and they fill your mind with all these, upgrades and other things that you can do, you end up owing them like $300. So really, then what I realized is like, oh, so that little box at Subway with the free gym membership, that was not them giving away a free gym membership. That was actually them using that as like an advertisement for their gym. And then even when you win the free membership, they're going to earn money on you anyways. Not to mention all the other business cards that they gather. They probably gather 100 or 1,000 business cards over a month. And then they get to like email all those people, call all those people, and upsell to all those people. So I realized that it was a scam. Or sort of like an elaborate marketing strategy that preys on your desire for something free, which is one of the patterns that you'll notice with these kinds of scams. Then later, when I was maybe 24 years old, I actually got scammed through a phishing email. I had a Yahoo, at the time, Yahoo had like an advertising platform. I had an advertising platform account through Yahoo, and I got an email into my inbox saying that like something is going on with my account. I need to click this link and log into my Yahoo account to make sure that everything is on board. And so I quickly did that, and then not realizing that the link that I clicked on was a phishing link. Like it led to some website that looked like Yahoo, but it was like a fake Yahoo. I logged into it, and really that website stole my login information for my Yahoo account. My Yahoo account was linked to my bank account because I was using that to pay for various kinds of ad campaigns. And then like the next day I noticed that $5,000 was missing from my bank account. And the reason that was because they got my login information for the Yahoo account. Then they used that Yahoo account to make some sort of big purchase, and then somehow siphon the money to themselves. So I actually ended up getting a chargeback. I called my bank and I was able to get that reversed. So I was able to get that money back. But that was the only time that I got phished through an email. This was very early. You know, now people are sort of like aware of how phishing emails work, but back then this was still very early, and so I didn't know what phishing was, and now I know. So I got scammed that way. I got scammed and basically robbed of $25,000 later, a few years later after that, from by a business partner that I was doing business with. So basically, my first online business had to do with generating leads for the insurance industry. And so I was generating leads and sending them to another company that was reselling them. And so they were kind of our middleman. We were using them for that. And what ended up happening is that we were sending them hundreds of leads over the course of a month. And these leads were pretty pricey. Each one of our leads that we generated was like $110 per lead. And we would be sending hundreds of these leads every week. So over a month, we might send them 500 leads, 1,000 leads times $110 each. So, you know, it adds up. And they would only pay us at the end of the month. And from the very beginning, I suspected this would be a problem because I'm wondering, like, well, what happens if we terminate our relationship? We're going to be owed for like a month worth of leads. And what's going to be the incentive of this company to pay us for that? Because the lead generation industry and the online marketing industry, they're pretty shady. There's like shady characters. Certain industries just attract people with low integrity. And so I knew that the business partner I was dealing with there wasn't really high integrity, and I suspected that they wouldn't pay us. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. After we terminated our business, they ended up owing us for like 1,000 leads, and it was about $25,000. And I actually had to do a lawsuit against them in Canada. The other problem is that they were located in Canada, so I had to actually fly to Canada. I have a whole episode from years ago where I talk about this, and so basically I got scammed for $25,000. I flew to Canada. I had to argue the case in a Canadian courtroom myself. I didn't have a lawyer. I had to argue it myself. Luckily, I ended up winning the case, but even though I won the case and I was awarded the $25,000, I was never able to get it back because it's one thing to win an award legally, and it's another thing to be able to collect it, especially from another country. So I lost out on $25,000 there. Another interesting scam that comes to mind is that I remember my brother and I were into online games, and we were into this game called EVE Online. I think it still exists. It's kind of an old game though. But EVE Online is like notorious for scammers because it's sort of like a libertarian fantasy. On EVE Online, it's all like player versus player competitive online multiplayer gaming. And people are notorious for running scams there. Anyways, I remember for Christmas, I bought my brother a Christmas gift of like some amount of EVE credits. Like it was a couple million EVE credits. This was maybe 10 years ago or so. And I gifted him this. And he was really into the game at that point, and he was going to use the credits to buy himself some like cool ship and other cool stuff in the game. And I think it was like, I might have paid like $200 for that couple million Eve credits at the time. And then I found out from him a few days later that he was going to buy himself this great ship, part of this guild that was supposed to be helping him to secure this great ship in the game. And then it was actually an elaborate scam. They ended up scamming all the money. He lost all the in-game credits that I gifted him. And then he quit the game because he was so frustrated with the scam. And if you read about EVE Online, this is just the tip of the iceberg of the kind of scams that and cons and the kind of machinations that happen with EVE Online. It's like a libertarian hellscape there. I mean, everybody is scheming against everybody else, and that's just sort of like the ethos of the community. And you will have people in the game infiltrate guilds and be part of these guilds, because guilds are very important. They will be part of these guilds, and they will spend years infiltrating guilds to finally, backstab them, sabotage them, and like rob them of all their money, and then basically destroy a whole guild from years of secret, covert, like espionage work. It's quite brutal, and very like real in that sense. It's not like a game; it's like real life. And then another story that comes to mind just recently, my mom was telling me about some relatives we have back in Russia, and my uncle, he took his he basically took his life savings, and he wanted to buy a condo in Russia, in Moscow. So he purchased a condo. It was going to be a new development. They were building a whole new high rise where one of the condo units would be his. He paid them for it. He paid them cash up front, and then the company went bankrupt, and years have passed now, and he still doesn't have his condo. And he probably never will. That kind of stuff is extremely common in Russia. Very easy to get scammed out of your life savings that way. So these are just sort of a random collection of stories from my own life. I'm sure you have some of your own. But it's these kinds of examples that made me even more savvy to being conned and scammed and exploited. So anyways, now let's move on to the actual tips for how to avoid these kinds of scams. Because really, this is pretty serious. If you're not careful with how you manage your finances, and if you're very naive and gullible, you can easily lose your entire life savings. You can lose your retirement. You can get screwed over in various kinds of investments. You can lose your house. You can lose your condo. You can lose your car, your boat, very high value assets. This kind of stuff can destroy your life if you're not careful. So it really is worth spending some time contemplating how these kinds of cons and scams work and making yourself immune to them. Because I'm telling you, this can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout the course of your life. All right, so here's a list of the top areas where you can get conned and scammed. This is an important list because if you're going into these areas dealing with these particular domains of life, you should be extra careful, extra savvy, extra vigilant about getting scammed. So any kind of large cash purchases, a car, a house, a boat, this kind of stuff, especially if you're paying money up front, if you're making big deposits, if a lot of money is involved, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you got to be super, super careful because there's always going to be conners and scammers when big money like that is at play. Next is the domain of business partnerships and legal contracts. You can get easily screwed over with any kind of legal contract. That's why you have to read them carefully. Don't just take someone's word on a legal contract. It's not just okay to just sign a legal contract. You have to read the whole thing, especially if you're doing any kind of business. If you're engaging in any kind of business partnerships where it's you and some other company that you're partnering with, you have to be very careful with how those partnerships are negotiated, how the terms are set, when you're going to be paid. You have to be extra careful about situations where you're delivering goods to somebody and then they're promising to pay you 30 days or 60 days afterwards, right? Because they could go out of business or they could run out of money. or they could just decide not to pay you. And how are you going to enforce that? In many cases, you can't, or it might take you years and years in a courtroom to enforce it, or it might cost you tens of thousands of dollars to hire an attorney to enforce it. And even then, you might not be able to get your money back, even if you win the lawsuit. So be careful there. The next category of thing is investments, Wall Street, crypto, NFTs, celebrity endorsements, and real estate. All of these are rife with scams and cons and people trying to get your money. And especially nowadays with crypto and NFTs, there's so much scam potential there. It's like the hot new thing, but probably 90% of crypto and NFTs are just pure out scams, pump and dump schemes, and so forth. So you have to be extremely careful, which is not to say that crypto is invalid or that there's no legitimate use to it or some legitimate use to NFTs, but just like the hype and the mania that you see right now around crypto and NFTs, you can tell that most of it is way overinflated, way overmarketed, and a lot of it is just scams, and people are losing thousands and even millions of dollars in these scams. And in general, any kind of investment products, especially exotic, new investment products that promise you a lot of return on your investment, watch out. The next category is loans, credit cards, payday loans, and financial instruments of various kinds. These are rife for exploitation. The next category is insurance. Health insurance, life insurance, annuities, car insurance, home insurance, travel insurance. The entire insurance industry is extremely sleazy, scammy. The way they craft the insurance contracts, a lot of times you may not get what you think you're going to get in terms of payouts for your insurance. There's all sorts of caveats and ways that they will screw you over. So watch out for that. A lot of money is made in insurance, and basically insurance is a scheme for exploiting people. That's why people who work in insurance make a lot of money because you don't have to work very hard, but yet you can make a lot of money through selling insurance. It tends to be a very shady industry. And in general, you should watch out for these industries that are shady and be extra, extra careful when you're doing business with those kinds of industries. The next category is marketing, ads, sales, discounts, freebies, free promotions, the way pricing is done on products, coupons, rewards cards, rewards programs, all this kind of markety stuff that is trying to save you money. Actually, all of it is designed to make money for these companies. So whenever you're being promised that, oh, you're going to save a lot of money with this coupon, a lot of money with this sale, a lot of money with this discount, just think about it a little bit. Like, why would some giant corporation who doesn't know or care about you be trying to save you money? They're not trying to save you money. They're making themselves money. So if they're trying to save you money, if that's what they're pitching to you, you have to start to think how that's actually making money for them. And a lot of times, their marketing programs and campaigns, their ads, they're very deceptive. They try to lure you in with sort of fake cheap pricing, sales and discounts and all this. Then there's upsells that they do. They promise you freebies to get you in. Then once you get your freebie, then they upsell you, or they have extra charges, extra fees, et cetera, and that's how they get you. So always be wary of sales and deals that seem too good to be true, because that's them baiting you in. That's the little bait that they put on the hook to hook you. The next category is business in a box solutions and get-rich-quick schemes. This is huge. The get-rich-quick scheme industry is one of the most shadiest and scammiest industries, because people who want to get rich quick, these are the perfect marks. These are the perfect gullible fools to con. These kinds of people, they're desperate. They want money fast, and then they're gonna pay or do anything to get their money fast, or to get some business in a box idea or solution or system, And then, of course, none of these things are going to be sustainable. None of them are really going to work. And you're not actually going to get rich quick. You're going to lose all your money. What little money you have, you're going to lose all that and end up with nothing. That's generally how these get rich quick schemes work. They prey on the desperate and the gullible. The next category is passive income schemes or promises of passive income where you don't have to do any work, but you get money every month. And MLM schemes, multi-level marketing schemes. These are notorious scams. Basically, they're pyramid schemes. The next category is door-to-door salesman. You have to be careful because, of course, the door-to-door salesman comes to your door, tries to sell you something, and then you're never going to see that person again. You're never going to be able to return the product, the warranty, who are you going to call for the warranty, like that kind of stuff. Speaking of which, the next category of exploit and scam is money-back guarantees, warranties, and testimonials. A lot of companies offer money-back guarantees that they don't actually honor. You should basically expect that if somebody is offering you a money-back guarantee on some product, they're probably not going to honor it. You should also expect that most warranty programs are scams, and a lot of warranty programs will not be honored, or if they will, under very strict conditions with a lot of caveats and a lot of exceptions and exclusions. And then you should also understand that a lot of testimonials that you see online, testimonials for various kinds of products, they're just fake. So you shouldn't trust testimonials. Or if they're not fake, they're extremely cherry-picked and they're not representative of the actual results that the product will deliver for you. The next category is employment negotiations and basically any kind of contracts, employment contracts, and so on. So when you're negotiating your salary with an employee, any kind of job contract, make sure you get it reviewed by your attorney. Make sure you read all the fine print and look at all the ways that the contract could screw you over, or that you could be screwed out of your salary, your bonus, your, whatever is promised to you. The next category is lotteries, sweepstakes, and free giveaways. These are notorious scams and a waste of your time and your money. That's the bottom line with those. You should just immediately avoid any lottery, sweepstakes, or free giveaways for the rest of your life. Nothing good will come from that. Even winning one of these lotteries, sweepstakes, or free giveaways, you think you actually won, but you didn't win. You're going to actually end up losing in the end. The next category, interestingly enough, is self-help. The self-help industry is actually notoriously scammy and exploitative. The self-help industry and also the business seminar industry. There's a whole industry for teaching people how to start their businesses and becoming financially independent. And the way that this kind of stuff is sold and taught is very scammy. They do a lot of upselling. They use various kinds of pressure sales tactics to get you to buy more and more of their courses, their products, their books, their seminars, their workshops. Eventually, you end up investing thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in these very expensive courses that promise you that you're going to become a great entrepreneur, or they're going to show you some secret technique for how to corner the market or whatever. And it's going to pay you great dividends. And then, of course, it doesn't pan out. Unfortunately, a lot of the self-help industry is stage orange, spiral dynamic stage orange. And a lot of them use high-pressure sales tactics to upsell you on self-help products that you don't really need, that are way overpriced, and they know how to get you to buy that stuff. Most self-help industry seminars are designed first and foremost using this kind of structure in order to slowly lure you into buying higher and higher priced courses, and they end up wasting a lot of your money this way. The next category is everything related to sex and to love. You see, And this is such an obvious one because sex and love, we crave this so much. These are like deep cravings that every human being has, to be loved and to have sex. And so, of course, this makes us very susceptible to being conned and scammed and exploited in this domain. And there's like subdomains of this domain. So you have to be very careful about not getting exploited in sexual relationships, when you're dating, in intimate relationships, when it comes to pornography, the purchasing of pornography, porn sites. Porn sites tend to have a lot of like shady, scammy stuff. Like a lot of times you enter your credit card number into a porn site, they will sell your credit card number, they will overcharge you, that kind of stuff. Strip clubs are notorious for robbing you of your money, exploiting you, conning you. Strippers are really good at that. Strippers have better game than PUAs. Prostitutes, if it comes to prostitution, that's a very shady industry where you can easily get scammed and exploited. And the pickup industry. Even though I've taught aspects of pickup and I have a lot of experience with pickup, I also, like when I entered the pickup industry, I was very, very aware of how shady the industry is, how shady the coaches are. It attracts sort of like the scum or the bottom of the barrel type of people. The people who sell pickup material, sell pickup courses, market pickup to you, promise you to get laid with girls, all this sorts of stuff. I'm not saying that pickup doesn't work. A lot of the advice is great, but you have to be very careful because of, well, honestly, the coaches that are selling pickup products and services, a lot of times they are gaming the guys more than they're gaming the girls because their attitude towards women is pretty shallow, and they game women and they manipulate women. And of course, that attitude that then just translates to the guys who are their customers who also want to learn how to manipulate women. So people who are into manipulating a lot, people who are trying to teach you how to manipulate women, you have to understand that these people have no ethical qualms. They will also then use those same tactics to manipulate men to get them to pay a lot of money. So they will lie, they will exaggerate, they will promise you things that aren't true, and they will exploit you. So be careful. And if you're a woman, you have to be careful with pickup guys who are into pickup because they will manipulate you and exploit you and basically use you for sex. That's a classic one. Classic trap for women. Another domain where you can get scammed and cheated is with hidden fees and monthly subscriptions. And more companies are moving to these monthly subscription models, whether it's video games or software services or whatever else. And that's how they get you. Joining any kind of fringe communities or groups, cults, religion, spirituality. Oddly enough, funnily enough, there's a lot of exploitation, scamming, and conning that comes within the spiritual community and the New Age community. So you have to be extra careful there. And that one is particularly devious because the New Age community and the spiritual community, it seems like, oh, well, spirituality in the New Age, it's non-dogmatic, it's non-ideological, it's beyond religion. It's not like an orthodox religion. And it's all about love, and it's all about sort of like community and being together and having compassion and being conscious, all this sorts of stuff, right? You get all these ideas in your head, and then, of course, that makes you the perfect target for scams and exploits once you're a part of such a community. I've heard many, many cases where spiritual communities and cults will leech tens of thousands of dollars from their followers and members, basically brainwashing them. And it becomes especially easy because, as part of the New Age and spirituality, you can say that, material concerns aren't important, right? And then so it's like, well, if material concerns aren't important, then why don't you just give me all your money? That's how it kind of works. And then if you're brainwashed into that, you might actually do that. You might actually say, yeah, why do I need my life savings? Why don't I just give my life savings to this guru? He needs it to enlighten the world, something like that. The next category is doctors, dentists, alternative medicine, mainstream medicine, miracle cures, and other kinds of new age cures. So the medical industry is extremely exploitative and scammy. And it's funny because they screw you on both ends. You can kind of divide the medical industry into two halves. You've got the mainstream, traditional orthodox, kind of like Western medicine that you find just, normal doctors and hospitals and insurance companies. They have designed, basically in the United States and in many other countries too, the health insurance industry is designed in such a way to be like a cartel that screws you over for any kind of medical complication that you have and service that you need. It's so baked into the system that most people don't even realize that it is a cartel and it's completely a rigged game. These insurance companies are overcharging. They're denying coverage for various kinds of conditions. The doctors are corrupted and influenced by the pharmaceutical companies who pay them to pitch their pills and products. A lot of times these doctors are so corrupted that they end up selling you and prescribing to you pills and medications that are dangerous or that you don't even need or that will harm your health long term just because they're incentivized to do so by the big pharma companies, their marketing campaigns and so forth. So there's that whole problem within mainstream medicine. But then you say, well, okay, so screw that. That's all sort of like very corporate. And, corporations are greedy. We all know that. So then you kind of swing your pendulum towards the alternative medicine field, the other half of this equation, and sort of like the new age community. And there they promise you various kinds of miracle cures and natural remedies and ointments and basically snake oil. They prey on your hopes. And they prey on the fact that, this is an all natural way, and we're not very corporate here. So we're not going to screw you over because we're not some big, giant, greedy, big pharma company. But actually, what they're selling you might even be more dangerous and even worse than what you find from some big pharma company. And this has actually been very, very obviously the case with what happened with COVID. So see, a lot of people have reacted against the COVID vaccines by thinking like, well, the COVID vaccines are manufactured by the government and by big pharma and by like these giant corporations which only care about profits. That's true. A lot of these companies only care about profits. And there is corruption in those industries and in the government. That's true. But then they say, like, they kind of swing their pendulum to the opposite end and they just go for like miracle cures and unscientific treatments like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or, whatever other, alternative treatments there are out there that it's actually even worse. It's worse than a vaccine. And so people are very confused about this. Like they're reacting against the corporate mainstream media or government or corporations, and then they end up painting themselves into a corner where they're more like new agey or alternative medicine, and that actually ends up hurting them even more, right? Just because the giant corporations are hungry for profits doesn't mean that your alternative cure is actually healthy or good for you or scientifically valid. So you have to be careful. You have to use nuance. Another domain where you can get scammed and exploited is, of course, politics and within media, talk radio, Fox News, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, people like this. These are grifters who are selling various kinds of like right-wing ideologies. And of course, it's not exclusive to right-wing ideologies. You can see this with left as well, but it's very, very blatant with right-wing ideologies. They sell you right-wing ideologies, and then they use that to get donations from you, to get you to be politically active, to participate. And so a lot of the stuff that we saw over the last 5 years with the whole Trump MAGA phenomena was basically a giant scam and con that was perpetrated by Trump and his lackeys and sympathizers on like 30% of the American population. That's what's so amazing. Like in history, when we look back on the Trump era, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, that whole 4 years, 5 years of Trump and the MAGA movement and the whole, storming of the Capitol and the big lie about stealing the election and election fraud and all this sorts of stuff, like all of that and all of Trump's antics, it's all going to be just seen as one giant con. Basically, a con artist was able to fool 30% of the American population into blindly supporting him. That's pretty remarkable. And of course, the only reason that was possible is because of the low consciousness of far-right ideology. You can easily use far-right ideology to bullshit people, to manipulate them, and to basically turn them into political zombies where they end up acting on your behalf to do despicable things like trying to overturn democracy or storming the Capitol. And that's precisely what makes right-wing ideology lower consciousness than left-wing ideology. Now, I'm not saying left-wing ideology can't be hijacked and used for selfish and nefarious purposes. It can, but less so than right-wing ideology. And that distinction is lost on a lot of people because they want to make a false equivalence between left and right. But they're not equivalent, as I've explained elsewhere. Another domain is social media, friend requests, and emails. So you have to be very careful with phishing emails. You have to be very careful on social media, people trying to become your friend, messaging you out of the blue, trying to slide into your DMs or whatever else. A lot of times they have an ulterior motive. They don't really want to be your friend. They want to get something out of you. They want to scam you in some way. They want to manipulate you in some way. Another domain is tourist situations. When you're a tourist traveling around, you're at a disadvantage because you're naive. You're in a new country. There's probably a language that you don't know how to speak or fully understand. And so you're inexperienced in a new place, and that makes you very vulnerable. And a lot of times tourists get scammed by locals, by various kinds of businesses, timeshare programs, and other kinds of scams that tourists fall for. Another domain is the darknet, drugs and psychedelics. Of course, the entire drug industry is very shady. And if you're going to be purchasing illegal drugs through the internet or even semi-legal drugs through the gray sort of market, research chemicals and this sorts of stuff, you have to be extra careful because a lot of times these are scams or exploits and they will steal your money. And of course, on the darknet, if you're going to be using the darknet, that's notorious for all sorts of scams. And the last domain is when companies close and go out of business. You have to be careful when your company that you're working for as a salaried employee is on the brink of going broke. You have to be very careful that you get your money from them, you get your salary from them as soon as possible, and you don't do any free work for them with promises that they'll pay you back later, because in practice they won't. In fact, this happened to my brother. He worked for an online startup company in Texas. He worked for them for like 5 years as a programmer. And it was obvious that the company was not doing well financially and that they were bleeding money every year. And, him and we talked about that. And I always wondered, where are they getting their money from? They had some wealthy investors, I think, from the Middle East or something like that. But in any situation where your business or your company that you're working for is not actually generating profit itself, but is relying on some sort of external investor, you can tell that eventually the money's going to run dry. The investor's going to pull out. And what ends up happening is the company has no more money to pay its employees. And so, sure enough, that company went broke after about 5 years. The investors pulled out, and my brother lost a month or two of of work that he did for them under salary, he just lost that money because they couldn't afford to pay him. So be careful about that. All right, so that's the list of domains. Now let me give you a list of examples of like, sometimes there's an outright con or scam, but other times you get exploited in more subtle ways. And I want to give you some examples of this so you're kind of savvy about this. Like, for example, I really noticed this recently when I was buying a house. I bought my house a couple of years ago, right in the middle of COVID, actually, well, a little bit before COVID. And it was interesting because it was my first time buying a house, and it was a big purchase. And I went into it very eyes open, very careful, because, anytime a big purchase is involved, where you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have to be very, very careful because you can get screwed in many different ways. So I went into the situation with my eyes open, but even so, I could see how I was being exploited in various ways. Like, one of the ways that they'll exploit you when you're buying a new house, not an old house, but like a brand new one that they're building for you, which is what I ended up buying, is a new construction. What they do is, the way they sell it to you is they sell it to you by showing you a model of the house. So usually they'll have 3 or 4 models, which are houses they already built that are just completely decked out. They're decked out with fancy tile, fancy wallpaper, fancy wood trims, and fancy backyard, and just like fancy lighting, fancy furniture, like everything. Like these houses. So what's funny is that, let's say a house like in a neighborhood of new construction, you're looking to buy a house that maybe costs $600,000 on average, right? That's what they want to sell you. But the models that they show you, those houses are decked out with an additional double that amount of decor, upgrades, and so on. So when you're walking through a model for a $600,000 house, what you have to realize is that actually that model cost the builder $1.2 million. But of course, you walk through it, you're so amazed, like, oh my God, this house is amazing. This is what I'm going to get for $600,000, a house like this? Incredible. Of course I want to buy it. And then when you get your real house, it doesn't look nearly as nice because it doesn't have all the upgrades. But when you signed the contract and you made the deposit, if you're naive, you were assuming that your house was going to be somewhat similar to this $1 million house, this model that they showed you. So I knew that was the case, but even still, like it's so difficult not to get hypnotized by these new house models because they're just so gorgeous. They're so well done. They're so well decorated. So one of the techniques that I used to kind of ground myself in reality when I was buying this house is, first of all, I asked them to go see actual houses that they were selling to customers. So it's one thing to look at models, because those are all decked out with furniture and trimmings and stuff. It's another thing to actually say, show me a house that you just finished building that's not decked out yet, with no upgrades in it. You go and look at that. That's actually what you're buying. And there's going to be a night and day difference between those two. So that helps to get you a realistic idea of what you're paying for. Furthermore, like, I actually went with the real estate agent who was selling me the house. I went with her through one of these model houses, and every item in the house, I would point to it and say, is that standard or is that an upgrade? So like, is the flooring in this house standard or upgrade? And she would say, it's an upgrade. It's like, is the backyard standard or upgrade? It's an upgrade. Is the lighting, the canned lighting in the house, is that a standard or upgrade? Oh, it's an upgrade. So like, everything was an upgrade, of course. And that gives you an idea of, of what you'll actually be getting. And then, of course, I would also I asked for an itemized list of every possible upgrade and what it costs. So I got like a 50-page document that contained literally every possible upgrade that the house could have and what it costs. And so I sat through and I looked through it very meticulously just to get an idea of what it would actually cost for me to make the upgrades that I wanted on my house. And in the end, I actually came out on top and I got the kind of house that I wanted, and I'm pretty happy with the house that I bought. But like, I was very meticulous. In fact, I was so meticulous that the lady who was selling me the house, she's like, oh my God, like you're the most meticulous person. You're like the most anal person who's ever purchased a house from me. Like she was making fun of me. But I knew while she was making fun of me for that, like I knew the importance of doing that. Because if you don't do that, if you just kind of bumble in there like a fool, you're going to get screwed. Other subtle exploits. The food industry is great at exploiting you. You'll notice that. Have you noticed that when you purchase a bag of chips at the store, potato chips, or you purchase a bottle of supplements, or you purchase a bottle of like olive oil, a lot of times the packaging is designed in such a way to make the package look twice as large as actually what you're getting in the package. Like you can get a bag of Lay's potato chips that's this big, but only half of it is actually filled with chips. That's a subtle way that Lay's is exploiting you, right? Because they could make the package exactly the volume of the chips. But if they did that, you wouldn't want to pay as much for it, because subconsciously you would think like, why am I paying that much money for such a small bag of chips? If you're paying, $5, you want a giant bag of chips. Subconsciously, this all registers in your mind. And all of these companies know that. Sometimes when you buy a bottle of olive oil, if you look underneath the bottle of olive oil, there's like a giant like dimple in there that goes like halfway up the bottle. So you think you're getting a bottle like this, but actually the bottom inside of it is carved out, like a third of it is carved out. So you're only getting 2/3 of what you thought you were getting. Supplements are also like this. You can get a bottle of pills that's a supplement that looks like this big, like, a bottle of vitamin C or something, and then you open it and like a third of it is empty. Why do they do that? Because subconsciously this gets you to pay more money than you otherwise would. Another subtle exploit, for example, is college textbooks. College textbooks are deliberately designed to exploit college students, to sell you a new textbook for some ridiculous amount of money every single year by just, changing a few parts of the textbook. Nothing substantial is being added to it, so that you couldn't even buy old used books because, the teacher and the curriculum is going to use the latest edition with, assigning homework assignments from that latest edition. They changed the homework assignments and the numbers so that you couldn't use the old editions to get you to, pay them more than you should. In a certain sense, the entire university system is like a scheme to exploit students by getting them to get loans. And this is especially true for many private universities, especially true for online universities. Talk about a shady industry, online universities. There you go. And the kind of loans that they want you to get on their behalf to pay for their shitty education. The medical industry, with the way that hospitals bill you, it's absurd. I mean, it basically should be criminal. Like, I remember I was having a bad reaction to some antibiotics that I took a year or two ago, and I actually called. I was thinking I might need to go to the emergency room for some of the reactions I was having. And I called a few of the hospitals in my area just to find out, like, what would it cost without insurance, because I didn't have insurance. What would it cost to go to the emergency room? And it's so galling, because you call the receptionist there and you just want to know, what does it cost just to get a basic admittance into the emergency room? And they don't give you a price. And they actually teach the receptionists there to bullshit you about why they can't give you a price. I mean, they know how much it costs. This is not a mystery to them. This is something they do on a daily basis. But of course, they don't reveal the prices to you. Why? So that once you go there, then they can charge you some ridiculous amount, and then you can't dispute it. You didn't even have an option to shop around. They don't want you shopping around different emergency rooms. They want you just to go to the nearest emergency room when you have an emergency. And then because you have an emergency, since it's an emergency, you don't have the luxury of shopping around. See, I was trying to shop around like early before my emergency got so severe that I had to go there. I was trying to do a little shopping around beforehand, but they don't want you doing that. Why? Because then they can't charge you the maximum rates. They don't want you thinking about what it costs. They also don't want you thinking about how overpriced it is. Other subtle exploits you should be careful of is in intimate relationships, both for men and for women. There are certain kinds of women who will exploit men for financial favors. And then there's certain kinds of men who will exploit women who are gullible enough, who fall in love with them. Then those men who are deadbeats will exploit those women, to get money out of them, to pay for their loans and so forth. So you have to be very careful not to mix your love life with your finances. Make a clear separation between these two. If somebody truly loves you, if you're in love with a man or a woman, then you might think like, well, because I love her or because he loves me, we should be able to just share money freely back and forth, and it's okay for me to buy this thing and for him to buy this thing and for me to take out a loan on his behalf and this kind of stuff. Like, no, as soon as you mix your love with finances, that's going to ruin your love. You see, true love is not going to require you to take out a loan. True love is not going to require you to buy some expensive thing, like some really expensive jewelry or some expensive fancy vacation. Like, if a woman really loves you, she's not going to require those things of you. And if a man really loves you and respects you, he's not going to be trying to get money out of you. If your partner is doing that, that's a huge red flag. Huge red flag. So those are just some examples of like subtle exploits that are, I wouldn't call them scams per se, but they're definitely exploiting you in subtle ways. And a lot of times these subtle exploits, they're so subtle and they're so systemic. I would call it a systemic scam in which the people that are playing part of the system and actually actualizing the scam, the people themselves who are doing that, they don't even know the scam they're participating in. So for example, when I call a receptionist at an emergency room and ask her, can you give me an itemized list of what it costs to get admitted and various procedures that I might need? And she says, oh, no, sorry, sir, like we don't do that because of XYZ reasons. See, she's giving me some excuses that someone higher up than her has designed. Deliberately, some businessman designed these excuses and then trained her to give these excuses to me. And when she's giving those excuses, it's not that she's consciously scamming me. She doesn't even understand what she's doing. She's participating in this hospital emergency room system, which is orchestrated as a scam, a systemic scam that is so systemic that the individual participants, the receptionist, the janitor that works there, the nurses, and even the doctors in the emergency room, they're not fully conscious of the scam that's being run by the emergency room. They think they're just doing good work. And in a certain sense, they're just doing good work. They're just following orders and they're doing their little part in a giant machine, which is ultimately preying on people who have health emergencies. Same thing, for example, with like the university system. Most of the people working in a university are not con artists or scammers. The professors aren't con artists. The guidance counselors aren't con artists. The administrators in the university are not con artists. But together, it all comes together in such a way that the loans that the university wants you to take out, the overpriced textbooks that they want you to buy, and other things like that, that is all part of a systemic scam that is being run, and it's really a survival strategy for the university. So you have to understand that there's ways to get exploited and screwed in life, which is not necessarily done consciously just by some evil, malicious, sociopathic individual or con artist, the classic con artist like Victor Lustig. A lot of times you'll get scammed and exploited in more subtle ways, in more systemic ways, where there's not going to be one manipulative individual that you can easily blame. Who's at fault? And so when it comes to these kinds of systemic scams, health insurance, life insurance, hospital system, university system, various kinds of charities, government organizations fall into that category. So to get good at not being scammed, you have to become good at judging character. Because fundamentally, con artists, manipulators, scammers, cheaters, grifters, they have it baked into their character. It's an attitude, and you can learn to sniff that out. You can develop an intuition for it. So here, I'm going to give you a long list of ways in which you can start to sniff this out. So for example, if you're promised grandiose promises or lots of promises, and the person tends to exaggerate and to boast, this is a red flag. If someone is promising to make you rich quick or to bring you lots of business, this is a red flag. If somebody is overly slick, very charismatic, a really good storyteller, very extroverted, just like very, has a very captivating personality, very eloquent, dresses very nice, has a great style. All of these are a red flag. Now, of course, a lot of times people just dress nice and they're extroverted and they're eloquent and they're normal. They're not con artists and they're not going to scam you. But it's definitely a red flag you want to be careful about, because eloquence and style and this kind of flash and this kind of like smooth talking, this is a great way to let down your guard that allows you to be scammed. Because then you start to trust the person, you develop a rapport with the person, you feel like they're your best friend, you feel like they're such a good storyteller, they're so funny, so eloquent, they're so stylish, they're so charismatic, that you forget about the actual substance of the business deal, you forget about the nitty-gritty details, you forget to ask hard, penetrating questions, and then you end up getting screwed. In general, you ask the question, does this sound too good to be true? And if it sounds too good to be true, that's a red flag. You have to also get good at sussing out low intellectual integrity people. Some people just have low intellectual integrity. They don't care about the truth. And that's a huge red flag. When someone doesn't care about the truth, doesn't value the truth, that basically gives them license to engage in deception and falsehood. So it's important to figure out the person you're dealing with, the company you're dealing with, do they value truth? And if they don't, that's a huge red flag, and you should not be doing business with them. You should not be in a relationship with them. You should not be in a partnership with them. Because truth is the foundation for everything. If you don't have truth, you're going to have falsehood. You're going to have illusion, delusion, lying, cheating, bullshit. That's the opposite of truth. It also helps for you to be able to assess a person's level of ego development. And if you want help for how to do that, I have several video series. I have my entire Spiral Dynamics video series that helps you to understand cognitive development. And then I also have a 3-part series called The 9 Stages of Ego Development, which explains the Susan Greuter model. If you study that model and you go through some of those stages yourself, you become good enough that you can actually see what stage of development an individual or even a corporation or a group of people are operating from, what spiral stage and what ego development stage. And this gives you a good idea of how likely it is that these people will try to exploit you. The lower the stage, the lower the level of ego development, the more exploitative and scammy these individuals or groups are going to be. And even just like if you're trying to get into an intimate relationship, it's really good to be able to assess your partner's level of spiral development and ego development. And if their level is too low, like you shouldn't be having sex with this person, you shouldn't be turning them into your girlfriend or boyfriend. You shouldn't be marrying them, certainly. You shouldn't be having children with them. And yet a lot of people just overlook this, and then they, they have sex, they become girlfriend, boyfriend, they get married, they have children. And by the time all that's done, it's too late. They didn't assess the person's level of development, and now they're wedded to this very low consciousness, low level of development individual. And there's really nothing you can do to solve that other than to leave. And then by that point, you're so invested, it's very difficult to leave, very painful to leave. Another red flag is, are your emotions being manipulated? So look how this works. Fear, greed, lust, hunger, anger, laziness, desperation, love. These are the emotions that are used to separate you from your money. Another red flag is a shortcut being promised? Are you being promised some sort of magical shortcut to avoid doing hard work? If you are, see, what that really is the con artist preying on your laziness. Most people are so lazy, they don't want to work hard. They don't want to work for years and decades to earn their wealth. They want some quick solution. They want a shortcut. They don't want to go to the gym and work out for 6 months to lose their weight. They don't want to change their diet. They don't want to learn some deep skill set that's going to take them a decade to master. They want some shortcut. And then those shortcuts are what you're sold. And of course, most of those shortcuts don't work. And they end up disappointing you, or even worse, they end up wasting your time and even hurting your health, your wealth, and your happiness. So beware of when a thing sounds too easy or too fast. It usually isn't true. Ask yourself the question, what is the true cost of a thing? A lot of times people get scammed because they don't appreciate the true cost of things. Like, what's the true cost of being healthy and fit? In reality, the true cost of that is changing your diet, learning about nutrition, going to the gym, working out every single day, caring about your health. That's the true cost. That's the kind of stuff that nobody wants to do, that everybody wants a sort of a magic shortcut around. Or like, what's the true cost of being financially independent and having a passive income? The true cost of that is not $1,000. Purchasing a $1,000 course to become financially independent, you can just see that it doesn't add up. The true cost of having an actually sustainable, stable, passive income, to get that, usually you'd have to work your ass off for 5, 10, 20 years to get something like that. And something like that is worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Nobody's going to sell that to you in a course for $1,000. Another way to make yourself immune to getting scammed is ask lots of nuanced questions and be very detail-oriented. Ask a lot of questions to the point where you start to annoy the person. Annoy the salesperson with your questions. Let them be annoyed. Get all the details you need, because it's in those details that you start to see contradictions and problems. You start to see the bullshit. Things don't add up. Ask for full pricing. A lot of times you go into a situation and the way the system is designed is that you feel uncomfortable, or you almost feel bad for asking about the full pricing of a thing. Like, a lot of times you go to a dentist and the dentist is offering you certain services. Once you're in the dentist chair, they will offer you upgrades and additional services. And you're just afraid or embarrassed to ask for the full price before you okay the procedure. And a lot of times they screw you over that way. So make a rule with yourself that you're not going to agree to any procedure or to any kind of purchase unless you have the full price beforehand. So if a doctor wants to prescribe you medicine, ask him the price first before you agree to the prescription. If a dentist wants to do a procedure on you, ask him the full price. Ask him to print it out on a piece of paper so you have it before you agree to anything. And if they don't want to give it to you, Or they're giving you excuses, which a lot of times they'll do. They'll give you excuses like, oh, we don't know the true price, or like, oh, we'll have to talk to insurance, or we can discuss that later. Stuff like don't settle for those kinds of excuses. Get the full price. And if you don't get the full price, they don't want to give you the full price, they don't know the full price, tell them then my decision is no, I'm not purchasing that. Another question you should ask yourself when you're investigating these situations is like, is this sustainable? A lot of these solutions that are sold are simply unsustainable, and it's pretty obvious. But a lot of people, they don't have a mind or an eye for sustainability. For me personally, whenever I go into a business deal or I'm considering some investment or a partnership with somebody or whatever, I'm always thinking about sustainability. Is this sustainable long term? Because most scammers and con artists, they're very short-term thinkers. They're not thinking long-term about anything. They're not thinking about sustainability. They're sort of just, they're looking for some sort of house of cards that looks like it's sustainable, but then it'll collapse as soon as you pull one of the cards a little bit. It all falls down. Always contemplate what's in it for them. If somebody is proposing to bring you a lot of business, to make you a lot of money, to give you a great investment idea, you always have to wonder, what's in it for them? They're not doing it because they're selfless and altruistic. Come on. What's in it for them? A lot of times what you'll discover is if you ask that question, you can start to see what's in it for them, and then you realize that actually what's in it for them is that they're leeching from you. They're gaining more from this relationship than you are, from this transaction, from this sale, from this business deal, from this partnership. They're benefiting more than you are, but they're hiding it from you. Another helpful hint here is the principle that actions speak louder than words. Words are not honest signals. It's very easy to bullshit with words. It's easy to exaggerate, to overpromise, to put a positive spin on a situation or a product or a service with words. So when you're going into a serious negotiation or considering a serious purchase or something like that, never just listen to the words of the person. Look at their actions. How do they behave? The principle here is that talk is cheap. What are words really worth? You can use words to say anything, to sell anything, to put a positive spin on anything. What matters is how the person behaves, how the product or service actually behaves. That's the substance. Look for the substance, not the cheap talk. Talk is cheap. It's very easy to take any bad investment and to talk it up with fancy words and make it sound as though it's the greatest thing ever. You have to look into the actual fundamentals of the investment, not the words around it. The next tip here is don't rush into things. Fools rush in. Be patient. Be deliberate. Do your research. Go read. Go educate yourself. Do the due diligence before you jump on board or sign a contract or sign a check or enter your credit card number or agree to a purchase or whatever. Beware of time-sensitive sort of pressure tactics. A lot of salespeople and marketing systems will use this on you. They will try to give you a discount that's only valid for the next 24 hours. Purchase in the next week. Otherwise, the price is going to go up. These kinds of tactics. So a principle that I've stuck to in my life is that any time that a business or a marketing campaign or whatever salesman tries to pressure me into making a quick decision, act now, or I'm going to lose out, the answer for me is always no. If you're going to pressure me and if you need me to buy your product within the next 24 hours, the answer by default is going to be no. I'm not buying it. I'm only going to buy it if you give me as much time as I want to sit, contemplate, research, and think about it. And if you're not going to give me that time, then the answer is just automatically no. And you can tell that to, to the salesperson you're dealing with. And a lot of con artists use this tactic because usually a con is like a house of cards that is in the process of collapsing, so they don't have a lot of time. They need you to act now. They need you to purchase now. Because if you wait a few days, you're going to be too sober, and their scheme and all their fancy talk is going to collapse. Another tip is to get multiple opinions, perspectives on a thing, and to shop around. Don't buy the first car. Don't buy the first house. Don't get married to the first girl or boy that you fall in love with. Shop around. See what the alternatives are. If you don't know the alternatives, then something bad can actually seem good when you have nothing else to compare it against. Get multiple perspectives. Talk to other people who have made these kinds of purchases or have been involved in these kinds of schemes that you're considering. Look for reviews. Independent reviews, not the reviews and testimonials that are published on their website. You have to find reviews and testimonials yourself from people who have used this product or this service or have done business with this person, who can vouch for this company, this service, or whatever, right? Independent reviews. The next tip is to check for narcissism, sociopathy, and mental illness. Personality disorders. These are deeper topics that I don't have time to go into here, but people who are con artists tend to have certain personality defects and traits like narcissism, sociopathy, Machiavellianism, this is called the dark triad, mental illness, personality disorders, trauma, abuse from childhood, this sorts of stuff. So you can learn to kind of suss that out. And this is especially important if you're talking about romantic relationships, sexual relationships. Don't fall in love with a narcissist, a sociopath, a mentally ill person, someone with borderline personality disorder. This will destroy your life if you fall in love with someone like this, or if you get married to someone like this, or if you have children with someone like this. Just another general principle here to make you immune to being conned is know your own values and stand firm on them. Set clear boundaries. My Life Purpose course shows you how to find your values. Once you find them, then you have to learn how to be firm about them and set boundaries. I'll have a whole episode about how to set boundaries. And then another adjacent principle here is don't be too nice and friendly when you're engaged in these sorts of business transactions. Don't be a doormat. You have to be willing to say no. No is a very powerful phrase. A lot of times when we're in a sales or business situation, we're too scared to say no. We're afraid to be confrontational. Like you're sitting in your dentist's chair in his office and he's doing some procedure on you. And then he says, well, are you interested in this extra procedure? Let me do this on you too. And you're afraid to say no. And so you just say yes because you want to be polite and friendly and you don't want to be confrontational. You have to stop doing that. You need to muster the courage to say no to people. If you are dealing with somebody in some business situation and you see a few red flags, and then finally it comes to like making a decision, are you going to buy this thing or not? Are we going to do business or not? If you see those red flags, that should already put you in the sort of default position of no. If there's red flags present, like 2 or 3 or more red flags, the answer should always be no. No should be the default, and yes should be only in those situations where everything seems to be going well. And a lot of times it's the opposite. A lot of times it's like, for people who are overly nice and friendly, their default is yes to everything and no only in the most extreme situations. You need to turn that around upside down. And in general, a lot of people don't like conflict. don't like to get confrontational with others, and I include myself in that. I was non-confrontational for a long time, overly friendly, overly nice, always saying yes to everything, and I had to retrain myself in that, and I had to make myself more willing to be confrontational, because otherwise I just saw myself getting exploited, and I was sick and tired of that. So if you're sick and tired of that, then stop being a doormat. I'll have an episode on how to stop being a doormat and how to say no. That's powerful. Saying no is very powerful. Another tip here for you is be extra careful when you're in third world countries. If you're traveling to China, Russia, India, and honestly, most parts of the world that are outside of like the first world Western democracies, you should immediately be on guard as a tourist in these places for scams. There's a whole industry in all these countries designed just for scamming naive, gullible people like you, inexperienced people like you, who don't know the language, don't know the culture, don't know the customs, don't know the traps. Here's some more tips. Be extra careful with promises of bonuses and promises of future profit sharing. This is a classic way to get screwed. If your boss or your company or your business partner says that, hey, work for me, come work for me for months and for years. And at the end of that, don't worry, like right now your salary is low, but at the end of that, you'll get a bonus. Once our product ships, I'll give you a bonus, and then we'll share revenue and profits with you once we succeed. Once we make the big sale, once we launch the product, I'll pay you back. And then you might be tempted to say, oh yeah, bonus, that sounds really nice. You know, profit sharing, that sounds really nice. And then in reality, you're never going to see that. The chances of you getting the bonus or the profit sharing that you were promised are probably less than 10%. So don't work for people. Don't give people months of your time for vague promises of bonuses and future profit sharing. And even if you do get your bonus, it might be a pitiful little amount. And those future profits that are going to be shared with you, you don't know how much they're going to share with you. Like that's at their whim. They might share 0. They might share 1%. You know, it might be pennies. Don't work for people because you're putting in hard labor for months on just vague promises of some kind of profit or bonus, which could be anything or nothing. And usually it's nothing. Beware when you're in a business negotiation situation or a sales situation and you're being given a large range. For example, they might say, purchase our course and we will help your business increase ROI, return on investment, from 50% to 2,000%. See, it's a large range. It's a very vague promise. Increasing ROI from 50% to 2,000%, that's a huge range. The reality is that you're not going to get 2,000%. You're probably not even going to get 50%, the low end of that range. So when people give you large ranges, like, well, you know, like, if you come to work for us, your salary could be anything between $30,000 and $100,000. That's a huge range. When someone tells you something like that, you always take the low end. So what they mean there is that your salary is going to be $30,000, not $100,000. They put $100,000 in there just to make it seem like it could be something higher. But usually what you end up getting is the very lowest of the range. So beware of these large ranges. It's a manipulation tactic. Beware of the following phrases that you can commonly hear. These are red flags. I'm definitely going to do ... whatever. This is a dead giveaway of somebody overpromising you something. Whenever words like definitely, absolutely, for sure, certainly, no doubt, when these kinds of words are used, these are all red flags. If someone says, I'm definitely going to do something, in my mind, what they mean is they're probably not going to do it. It's exactly the opposite. right? It's like if someone says, I'm absolutely going to show up at 6 p.m. for our coffee. In my mind, I'm thinking they're probably not going to show up at all. Because if you were going to show up, you wouldn't need to sort of like amp it up with these sorts of words like absolutely, definitely, for sure, certainly. You don't need to say that. If you're going to show up, you're going to show up. You don't need to hype it up. Another phrase that's a red flag is, I'm looking out for you. Beware when someone says that to you. I'm looking out for you. Or another one, you can trust me. Just trust me on this. When someone says, just trust me on this, what they actually mean is, you can't be trusted. They can't be trusted. If someone says, I'm looking out for you, what they really mean is they're looking out for themselves. If someone tells you, don't worry, leave it to me, I'll handle everything, what they really mean is leave it to them to handle everything for their own benefit, not for your benefit. If someone says, believe me, don't believe them. If someone says, oh, but what do you have to lose? You have nothing to lose. What that actually means is you have something to lose. There's always something to lose. Whenever someone tells me, oh, you have nothing to lose, just try this, it's obvious they're bullshitting me. So just be aware of these common salesy, markety, bullshitty tactics. Beware of emotional stories from strangers. Overly emotional stories that tug at your heartstrings. This is emotional manipulation. Beware of that. Beware of what's called FOMO, fear of missing out. So a lot of times to get you to act fast and to buy something immediately, a story is presented of like, this is the greatest thing and it's only going to last for a limited number of days, short amount of time. Act now or you're going to lose your chance. Fear of missing out, FOMO. Anytime you feel that kind of pressure to act, the default answer should be no, I'm not investing. I'm not buying. I'm not doing business with you. Beware of deflection and changing the subject. For example, you're asking some penetrating questions. You're asking nuanced questions, and then you might get ridiculed for that. Or the salesperson will somehow deflect, change the subject to talk about something else rather than answering your questions. That's a red flag. If you're dealing with somebody, you should have an expectation that they give you direct answers to your questions. If they're deflecting, if they're dodging and weaving and changing the subject, or they're cracking jokes and stuff like that without actually giving you definitive answers to your questions, then the default answer to them should be no. Then we're not doing business. Then I'm not buying. Another very powerful principle is when it comes to lending money. Never lend money to anyone. It's very simple. Never lend money to anyone. Especially your friends and your family and your romantic partner. Make a principle that you're not going to mix finances with love. Because see, people who are close to you, friends and family and your lovers and so forth, they can make you feel like, oh, but if you love me, then you should lend me money because, we're so close. I understand why you wouldn't lend money to a stranger, but we're family. Or we're sleeping together. So of course you should trust me to lend me money. No. As soon as you lend money to somebody you love, like a brother, a father, a mother, a sister, a cousin, a friend, a lover, that immediately changes the dynamic of the relationship from one which is just based on love and genuine care and compassion for each other to a business transaction. Why would you want to do that? If they truly loved you, they wouldn't put you into a position where your relationship with them now becomes financial. See? A high quality person is not going to come to you asking for a loan, even when they really need it. They won't do that to you because they value the relationship too much. And the final point here is you have to make a distinction between the facade or the surface of a thing versus the substance of a thing. So there's like the facade or the surface of a product or a service or a relationship or a partnership, the facade of it, and then the actual substance of it. Like when you're talking about an investment, right? Like you're investing into a house, there's the facade of the house, and then there's actual substance of the house, the structure of it. Is it a solid house? Is it built on a solid foundation? Is it properly constructed? Is it in the right location? Is it going to hold it? Is it going to hold its value? What is the quality of the materials that are used in the construction? This is the substance. And then the surface and the facade is like, like the landscaping outside the house and various kinds of marketing gimmickry and whatever sale is happening right now, and they're promising to take $50,000 off the top of the price. This is the facade of it. You have to always go to the fundamentals, to the substance of a thing. And even when you're dealing with people, there's the facade of the person, and then there's the substance of the person, their true character, what they're really like when they are not on, so to speak, when they're not trying to manipulate you. What are they really like? What are their values? What are their standards for behavior? What is their level of integrity? How much do they care about the truth? How much do they really embody love? These are the substance. And the facade is like what they look like, the makeup they put on, maybe the funny stories they tell, the kind of suit they wear. This is the facade. That's not the important stuff. You have to be able to see through that stuff, like, how well they dress. That's a facade. Like, you can have a horrible person dress really nice. So you can't judge a person by how they dress. And likewise, you can have a horrible person tell you interesting, charming stories and crack jokes with you and build a sort of a friendly rapport with you. A horrible person, a psychopath, can do that. But the substance there is that it's a psychopath with this pleasant facade. So beware of these facades. And don't make excuses for all these red flags. If you are going into a situation, whether it's a relationship, a partnership, a business deal, a sale, whatever, and you notice let's say three or more of these red flags, that should automatically put you into the default of no. And then put the burden on that person or that party to then change your mind. Maybe these red flags are not a deal breaker. Maybe you're just, a little bit overly cautious. But so what? It's better to be overly cautious than to get screwed in this case. So the default after a few red flags is no, unless that person is willing to do some work and address the red flags. You can bring up the red flags to them, see how they react to them. Maybe they can address, maybe they have some legitimate justifications or excuses, or maybe there's some miscommunication. That's fine. Then you can still go forward. But by default, unless they address it, it's a no. See? Like, for example, you go into a situation and the salesperson says, okay, you have to decide to buy this house in the next week. That's a red flag. That would be a red flag for me. And then maybe I would say, well, I'm interested in this house, but I don't like being pressured. So why do I have to do it in the next week? That seems contrived and artificial. Do you have a good reason for why it has to be next week, or are you just saying that because you want me to buy the house, right? See, and if they can address that and they can say, well, yeah, honestly, we have somebody who's already looking at the house, so if they buy it before you, then you're going to lose this house. And if they're not lying to you, that can be legitimate. That can be a legitimate thing. Maybe, in a hot housing market, you don't have a lot of time to buy a house sometimes. But also a lot of times they can just lie to you about that. So you have to kind of suss it out and see, is the time sensitivity truly legitimate, or is just some bullshit marketing tactic, sales tactic? So that's what I mean by these red flags. In general, salespeople, con artists, and scammers, they prey on your emotional vulnerabilities and your ego's desires, needs, weaknesses, and insecurities. Do you see how this works? Because the human mind is not primarily run by logic and reason. It's mostly run by emotions. Most purchase decisions are made on emotions, not on cold logic and facts and science. And of course, all marketers, advertisers, salespeople, and con artists understand this. Either explicitly or just intuitively, they understand this. But a lot of marketers are actually taught this explicitly these days. A lot of marketing courses will teach you that, to make a sale, you have to prey on the fears and insecurities of your customers. Literally, that's what they teach you. They're shameless about it. So con artists tend to prey on the inexperienced. Con artists prey on the desperate. Con artists prey on the greedy and the lazy. Con artists prey on the impatient. And con artists play on your fear. These 5 things are huge. Lack of experience, desperation, greed and laziness, impatience and fear. And if you have all of these combined together, you're the perfect mark. But even just one of these will be enough to scam you. So the root solution here, to make yourself immune from being scammed, is to take care of that. Gain massive experience. Be well educated. Stop being desperate and needy in the situation that you go into. Because if you're going to be desperate, that's the surest way to get screwed over. Because then you don't have a choice. See, if you get stabbed in the gut, you're in a desperate situation. You need an emergency room right fucking now. You don't have time to shop around for emergency rooms. So you're just going to get taken to the nearest emergency room. And of course, they're going to screw you over on the billing because you're desperate. See, what you should have done is you should have researched these emergency rooms before you got stabbed, not afterwards. Then you wouldn't have been desperate. But that requires that you look forward. You have to have a vision, a long time horizon when you're planning out your life. If you're just sort of reacting all the time in your life, you're constantly desperate. You're putting yourself in desperate situations. You don't have enough money, so you got to go get a payday loan, which is going to screw you over. Or you're desperate for sex, so you go and you make some deal with a prostitute, and then she screws you over. You see how this works? Or you're desperate for love and a boyfriend, and so you fall in love with the first guy you sleep with, and then he screws you over. See how that works? And then if you're greedy and you're lazy, of course, that makes you a really easy mark. If you're impatient, too. And if you're afraid. When you're in the grip of fear, it's very easy to sell to you. And that's what most marketers and advertisers do, is they prey on your fear. Going through extreme life changes makes you the most vulnerable to scams and cons. And a lot of times, for example, cults and religions, they have an entire marketing strategy designed around this. They specifically look for people who are vulnerable, who are going through an extreme life change. For example, they will look for alcoholics, They will look for drug addicts. They will look for people who just got divorced. They will look for somebody who just lost someone in their family. Somebody died. A parent or a child of theirs died. Now they're very vulnerable. Now you can sell them on any kind of new age cult, any kind of miracle cure or a course, or like, let's say somebody just got diagnosed with a terminal disease, cancer or something like that. This person is so desperate that they will pay money for any kind of miracle cure at that point. So if you're in a vulnerable place in your life, if you're going through an extreme life transition, through a divorce, through a death in the family, through a loss of your job, through a career change, through the loss of your business, bankruptcy, right? There are entire professions and industries designed to prey on people like you going through that specific situation. There are entire industries designed to prey on people who just got a cancer diagnosis. There are entire industries looking to exploit people who just got divorced or are going through a divorce. There are entire industries that are looking to brainwash people who are addicted to substances because they're very vulnerable. The best way to avoid getting scammed is to have a strong character, low ego, develop yourself, educate yourself, be non-needy, be detached from outcome, be fearless, be hardworking, have intellectual integrity, be experienced, be patient, be long-term oriented, and be principled. Have principles that you live by. And in general, don't be so survival oriented. Be oriented towards something higher than just survival or just pure utility. In other words, become more conscious and more integrous. This is the ultimate solution to getting scammed and exploited by others. Lack of consciousness leads to illusion and self-deception. Unconscious people are very easily manipulated. Their minds are easily controlled. Their minds can be filled with all sorts of stories and ideologies and belief systems. That basically turn these people into zombies. And human beings have been controlling other human beings in this way since the dawn of time. So you should be wise to this and not let anybody manipulate you like that. And the way you do that fundamentally is through all the ways I just mentioned above. I mean, first and foremost, by raising your consciousness, developing yourself, working hard, and being experienced and well-educated. I want to make a specific point here to women. You ladies need to be extra careful about guys scamming you in the domain of intimacy and love. There are categories of men out there, not all men, but some men who prey on this. Because once you ladies have sex, you fall in love, it becomes a chemical addiction for you. And basically men are going to almost say anything to you to get laid. And so once you fall in love with them, then it's very easy for them a lot of times to manipulate you, especially if you don't have a firm sense of your own values and how to set boundaries. A lot of women fall into this trap of being overly compassionate in a feminine way, overly loving, overly loyal, to the point where men just exploit that because you fall in love with them. And this can destroy your whole life. For some women, this is the whole story of their life, is that they fall in love with some guy or a series of guys who just take and take and take, leech and leech and leech and leech, and suck you dry and leave you hanging in the end. So I want you to be very savvy about that. Which, of course, is not to say that you should be paranoid and not fall in love with men. It's just that before you fall in love with them, really assess their character. Who are you falling in love with? Who are you sleeping with? Really assess their character. Look for these kinds of red flags. And get good at saying no. Get good at setting boundaries. I'll have episodes specifically about that in the future, about how to say no, how to stop being a doormat, how to set boundaries, because this is huge. And of course, men also suffer from this problem, but in the domain of romance, especially women suffer from this problem. You should know that there's two types of bullshitters in the world. There are those that know that they're full of shit, like the con artists, and then there are those who believe that they're actually good people and that they're true believers, so to speak. They don't even realize that they're bullshitting you. Like that receptionist in the emergency room that you call to ask for prices, she's going to bullshit you, and she probably doesn't even recognize that she's bullshitting you. And in fact, in a certain sense, the most common situation is people bullshitting you without recognizing that they're bullshitting you because they've bullshitted themselves. The true hardcore con artists like the Donald Trumps of the world, they can certainly screw you over pretty bad if you run into one of these people, but they're pretty rare. The majority of people are not like Donald Trump. They're not proper con artists, but they participate through their complacency and lack of consciousness and lack of care. They participate in systems of exploitation without even seeing what they're doing. They're cogs in a machine. So the bottom line is that fools get scammed. And if you want some more clarity upon that, check out my episode called What is Wisdom? In that episode, I make a distinction between wisdom and foolishness. That's a powerful episode. You can connect it here with this episode, with what I just said about fools getting scammed. Ask yourself the question, contemplate this. Why do fools get scammed? Why is it hard to scam a wise person? Contemplate that. There's something valuable that you can get from contemplating that, and watch that episode about wisdom to see what is meant by wisdom versus foolishness and why fools are so prone to getting scammed. And that's what you see with the Trumpism MAGA phenomena of the last 5 years. If you actually watch interviews with Trump supporters, his most rabid fans, watch interviews. It's very fascinating from a psychological point of view. I'm not being partisan here. When I'm talking about Trump and shitting on Trump, I'm not being partisan. Like I'm treating him as a sort of a psychological case, right? Like, stop caring about Democrats, Republicans. Just like look at his character, look at how he behaves, and also look at his followers and how they behave, and the reasons they give for why they follow Trump and why they love Trump. And what you'll see is that these people are fucking fools. These MAGA people are fucking fools. And that's precisely who a con artist like Trump would fool, is a fool. They're not wise people. They're not well-educated people. It's not an accident that the MAGA crowd, one of the clearest demarcations of the MAGA crowd from not is that they don't have a college education. Because the more educated you are, the wiser you become, the less of a fool you are. And it's no accident that Trump himself is not a very well-educated person. It seems like he hasn't read a single book in his life. But he's an amazing con artist. So what's funny is that the funniest thing about Trump is like it's amazing how far he got in life and how little blowback really he's gotten for the incredible cons that he's run. I mean, he's probably one of the best con artists of all time. Literally of all time. One of the best con artists of all time. And what's funny is that his supporters don't see it because they're so blinded by ideology and partisanship and their political biases and their hatred for liberals and progressives and Democrats and socialism and all this sort of stuff. They're so blinded by that, by the content of that they don't see the structure. See my episode, Content versus Structure, for that distinction. They don't see the structure of Trump as a con artist. And a lot of times people are debating or arguing about Trump, like in a political discussion, they're like, well, should we vote for Trump or for Biden? But, like Trump is better at these things, and then Biden is better at these things on sort of like, they're discussing this on sort of like a policy level or a character level like that. But what's missed in that kind of discussion is that Biden is not a fucking con artist. Trump is. That's the most important distinction. And that ends the entire discussion. It doesn't even matter what the foreign policy is, what the domestic policy, like none of that shit matters. You cannot have a fucking con artist as a leader of your country. That's like a recipe for catastrophe. That's the worst possible thing, is to elect a con artist as the leader of one of the most powerful countries in the world. And the fact that people don't recognize that simple point is both funny and tragic at the same time. It's very tragic. It's very depressing. It shows us the lack of, fundamentally, the lack of education of the American populace, that they fall for this kind of shit. Because if our populace was better educated, nobody would fall for Trump's shit, or maybe in the single-digit percentages, maybe 5% of the population, maybe 9%, but no more than that. The fact that 30 to 40% of the American population actually thinks that Trump makes a good leader is deeply disturbing. And not because of some political partisan reasons. They lack a basic recognition of a flawed character. See, now whatever criticism you have of Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton or whatever else, you might say, oh, they're dirty politicians and all politicians are the same. No, not all politicians are the same. There's a difference between a fucking con artist and a typical run-of-the-mill politician like Joe Biden. Politicians can lie, they can exaggerate, they can make false promises. Yeah, this is all standard for politicians. But then you have a fucking con artist. You see the difference? That's a huge difference. If you cannot see that difference, you're really lost in life. You're in a really bad place. And if you're denying this difference, you are utterly blinded by partisan bias. Because what I'm talking about here is not a partisan thing. It's not a matter of Democrat or Republican or whatever. You could have a con artist on the progressive or the Democratic side. And if we had one, I would be saying the same thing about him or her. But like Hillary Clinton is not a con artist in the way that Trump is. And the fact that people cannot make that distinction, many intelligent people, many political analysts and so forth, literally cannot make this distinction, that is deeply problematic. And that's not because I like Hillary Clinton. But also what you should understand about people like Trump is that it doesn't make much sense to morally judge con artists and scammers. In the end, he's just like a fox. He's doing what a fox does. It's a survival strategy. So moral judgment here isn't the solution. The solution is just to become wise to the con. Also, I should note that this episode is not licensed for conspiracy theories and cynicism. I also see a lot of that. So I see that there's a big mistake that people make is that they can listen to this episode and say, oh, okay, yeah, Leo, I agree with you. Yeah, there's so many con artists and scammers and bullshitters out there in the world. Like all the politicians are con artists and the CEOs are con artists, the billionaires, the millionaires, the corporate elites, they're all con artists, they're all scamming me. They're all in on it. And then you become so cynical from that. This would be a mistake, a very deep mistake. Just because there are some scams within the self-help industry or within get-rich-quick schemes or within pickup or within religion or within politics, it does not mean that the entire domain is a scam. It does not mean that you shouldn't read self-help books. It does not mean that you shouldn't go out there and buy business courses. There are great business and marketing courses out there. Not all of them are sleazy get-rich-quick schemes. It does not mean you can't learn valuable dating advice from pickup, for example. It does not mean that there's not truth within religion, for example, even though there's a lot of bullshit within religion. So you have to be nuanced here. Don't become cynical. Actually, the majority of humans are fairly honest, decent, good people who are not looking to scam you or to con you in some business deal. Most people do honest business. There are some bad apples, maybe 5%, maybe 10% are bad apples, but the majority, 90%, 95% is good stuff. So don't become too cynical here. Don't get paranoid about this stuff. By default, you should be friendly and open. I don't want you going into every business situation like paranoid that you're going to get screwed over and cynical that you're dealing with a con artist. This would be a mistake because the majority of people you're going to be doing business with are not con artists. But you do want to be on the lookout for these red flags. And also, if you do get scammed, it's not the end of the world. Reframe it as a learning opportunity. Every time you get scammed or exploited or cheated, even if it's for $10, you clip a $10 coupon and then they end up not honoring it. Yeah, you got cheated for $10 or whatever. Use that to learn your lesson. Really what you want to avoid is the major scams. When you're dealing with tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, when you're dealing with your retirement savings, the purchasing of a large house or a car or some sort of annuity product or a life insurance product, right? Or getting a giant loan. In these situations, these are the real disasters you want to avoid. The little scams where you get scammed for $10 here, $100 there, consider these as just like lessons for how to avoid getting scammed on the really big stuff. So if you lose $1,000, it's not a big deal. Actually, if you truly learn the lesson from losing that $1,000, that will be well worth the $1,000 that was scammed from you. Reframe it as like, oh, I paid $1,000 to learn how to never get scammed again. Because if I didn't learn that lesson, I would have gotten scammed for $100,000 in the future in my life because I would have been naive and gullible. That reframe is important. Also, I don't want you to use this kind of notion of a scam as an excuse to not explore new domains and take risks and to grow. Be careful being too risk averse and too cynical and too naysaying. I've taken quite a few risks in my life that have panned out well for me. I've gotten enormous value from certain shady domains and businesses that, if I would have said just like, oh, well, all of these people in this industry are all just bullshitters, I'm not even going to look at this industry, I'm not going to even participate, that would have actually set me back. I'll give you a few examples of that. For example, when I first got into online marketing, this was like 15 years ago, I got into search engine optimization. I did some of that. And there was a very crucial turning point, very distinctive turning point that led to my becoming financially independent. And what happened was that I was researching search engine optimization, just getting my feet wet. And then I ran into, on some online forum, I ran into some random Indian dude from India who made a promise to me that he can rank my website #1 for like a popular search term in Google. This was 15 years ago. And if he could do that, that would mean thousands of dollars of profit for me. That was huge, right? At the time, I was kind of desperate. I needed some way to make a business work. I didn't know how. I was desperate. So on the one hand, I needed his promise to pan out. On the other hand, I was simultaneously very skeptical that he could fulfill on this promise. And he wanted like $1,000 up front. So I was so desperate that I paid him $1,000. And he did some behind the scenes manipulations and stuff with my website to help me to rank on Google. And I'm not talking about Actualized.org, I'm talking about a different website. And so anyways, he did that for me. And it was so funny how it panned out, because what happened was that it took him months to finish the work, and he was doing the work in a very slow, lazy way. I got very impatient with him with how he was doing the work. And so eventually, we actually kind of got like in a fight, and I ended up firing him and sort of like losing my $1,000. But so in that sense, you might say, well, it didn't pan out. But what did happen was that I did see that he was able to raise my position in the Google search results, not to the top, but I was able to see how he affected it. And just that possibility was enough to open in my mind the idea that if he could do it a little bit, imagine how well I could do it if I did it myself, if I stopped outsourcing this to somebody else. And so that's what happened is I fired him. I forgot about the $1,000 because there was some bigger prize. And the bigger prize was that I was going to learn how to do SEO like really for myself. So I learned how to do that. And from that, I ended up earning hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you see, that kind of risk actually panned out. Even though it was a shady guy in a shady industry, the search engine industry is very shady, notoriously very shady. See, if I was too cynical, I could have been like, oh, well, this guy is promising me too much, and it's a lot of money up front, and he's a shady guy, it's a shady industry, so, fuck that, I'm not even going to try. If I did that, I don't know, I would be nowhere right now. So a lot of times it's better just to take action and even to fail in your action rather than just be cynical and just do nothing. Doing nothing is oftentimes the worst possible thing you could do. It's even worse than taking a gamble. A similar thing happened with when I got into pickup. When I got into pickup, I immediately recognized that pickup is a very shady, low consciousness, low integrity industry with many toxic, dysfunctional people. That was very clear to me. But I was also able to sort the wheat from the chaff, and I recognized that even though most of the guys who are in pickup are dysfunctional, they're sex addicts, they're traumatized, they have very bad relationships with women, I can still learn certain principles of attraction and improve my results with women and yet avoid all the toxicity, leave that behind. I would be able to take the baby out of the bathwater and leave behind the bathwater, so to speak. And so that's that's basically what I did. And it was enormously beneficial for me. But see, that requires such nuance. I don't know how to explain that, because like I'm sort of hesitant to recommend pickup to people in a certain sense, because a lot of people just kind of like jump into it and then they will absorb all the toxic elements of it without being able to separate the wheat from the chaff, which is unfortunate. Another area where I took some risk that panned out for me is with spirituality. The pursuit of spirituality and awakening. There's so much bullshit within the New Age circles, within spirituality, within religion, right? And a lot of like atheists and rationally minded, scientifically minded people, they will look at the whole spirituality community and the whole spirituality genre or domain, and they will dismiss the entire thing. And they will say like, well, Leo, why should I take the risk of meditating so much and studying spirituality? Like, it seems very risky. It's got huge time investment. And then like, what am I going to get in the end for it? Isn't it all just like a bunch of mental masturbation and wishful thinking? See, it can seem that way. And so then what do? You act lazy. You don't meditate. You don't do any spiritual practices. You don't do any spiritual reading, so forth. And then you got nothing. Basically, you got nothing. You go nowhere, right? You risk nothing and you gain nothing. But what happened with me with spirituality is that I went into it. I made some strategic risks, experimented a lot, and then ultimately found the Holy Grail. So it's funny how sometimes in life you will find just diamonds and gems floating in a pile of horseshit. And so I'm just giving you these examples because I don't want you to become so cynical that you become inactive. It's very easy to say that, oh, all get-rich-quick schemes and passive income schemes, they're all just scams, and I'm going to do nothing. Or like, oh, all of these pickup coaches talking about how they're having sex with these hot girls, oh, it's all just fake bullshit, and the only way to have sex with a hot girl is to have a big dick and a giant jaw and have like a perfectly symmetrical face. And so because I don't have that, because I'm short, I'm going to do nothing. Or it's like, oh, well, spirituality promises you God and enlightenment, all this stuff, but like, it's all just wishful thinking and bullshit. And, love isn't real. God isn't real. None of this is all. And then you're just so cynical that you do nothing. I don't want you to fall into that trap of cynicism. It's better to try something and fail than just to do nothing. Because at least when you're trying stuff and failing, you're getting feedback. It's pushing you. You have something you're moving towards. And then you can adjust course. If one thing fails, then you can move on to the next thing. Something adjacent to it that might succeed. Right? But if you're sitting there doing nothing, you can't do anything with that. You see? And if you're mired in cynicism, that can be almost worse than doing nothing, because then you're sitting on your couch and you're criticizing everybody for everything that they're doing wrong. And, you're criticizing corporations, you're criticizing the media, you're criticizing the politicians, you're criticizing religion, you're criticizing everything. And that becomes your whole life. You're just online criticizing people. But you're not doing anything constructive, you see. It's way better to do something constructive than to do nothing or to be cynical. Even if your constructive thing is a bit naive and foolish and you end up failing the first few times you do it. But then, as you fail and you do it, something constructive, you learn how to be constructive in more effective ways. Sometimes taking action and getting scammed is better than doing nothing at all. And don't forget, God is the biggest scammer and con artist. God scammed itself into thinking that it isn't God, but it's a human sitting there right now listening to me. Illusion and deception, these are fundamental mechanisms of how consciousness and the universe functions. You are dreaming up reality. Reality is a giant scam that you're playing on yourself. For more on that, go check out my episode, my 3-part series called Self-Deception, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, where I talk about the fundamental nature of self-deception, why it's so important to the structure of reality. And also in the future, I'm going to have an episode about illusion. Specifically, we're going to talk about illusion and the role that illusion plays within the structure of reality. It's fundamental to how consciousness works. So the bottom line is embrace the trickery of reality. See, reality is a tricky thing. It's not straightforward. Reality is full of illusions and appearances and facades that mask what's really at the root. And so just in general, I want you to become savvy to this kind of distinction between the appearance of a thing versus its core, its substance. And to stop being fooled by appearances. In the future, I'm going to release an episode, I think, called How to Assess Bad Character. We've touched upon it in this episode, but I specifically want to focus in on that because really if you develop the capacity to assess bad character in others, this is going to save you so much misery, suffering, heartache, and financial loss in your life. So I'm working on a list of how to assess bad character. Stay tuned for that. We'll talk about that, and that will dovetail with this episode about how to avoid getting conned, of course. Because if you can assess bad character, that is like 80% of the work of avoiding getting conned. And one final thing, I want to give a little shout out to a YouTube channel called CoffeeZilla. CoffeeZilla. It's a great channel run by a couple of guys who basically the whole channel's premise is that they call out various kinds of con artists and scammers and grifters within especially the sort of get-rich-quick field, within the self-help field, maybe even with a little bit of spirituality, with crypto, NFTs, this sort of stuff. So they do a lot of like expose videos. Great channel, funny, entertaining, also useful and practical. If you watch some of their videos, like they really do breakdowns of how these grifts work, how these get-rich-quick schemes work, how people get exploited from and lose tens of thousands of dollars falling for these kinds of schemes online. So if you want some like the actual practical examples of all the stuff I've been talking about here sort of in the abstract, they got really practical examples. They will actually give you names of gurus and business coaches and others who are, scamming people and bilking them of thousands of dollars. So it's a great channel. Go check them out. And that is that. So now you should be set for life to avoid getting conned and scammed. This episode is really like what I would want. If I had a son, I would force him to watch this episode as he was growing up and then going off into adulthood. Because I just know how easy it would be for him to get scammed and exploited in the world. And so I would say just like, here, son, watch this. This will prepare you. This will inoculate you against all the trickery that humans have come up with to separate you from your money. And I hope it's had the same effect on you.